During this preaching series, we've been a teaching series about preaching. We've been talking about a lot of things, and there's one thing that I don't know if I really want to talk about, and that is to close or not to close. And of course, by close, you know what I'm talking about. Does one hoop at the end of their sermon or not? In fact, YouTube hits are through the roof. If you close, people, they will fast forward your sermon just to get to that last 10 minutes to hear somebody closes. I think if the close becomes in and of itself the only reason I listen, that somehow the word of God has been defeated, because there's so much substance that we're trying to put before the close that if I only rush to the close, then it becomes more about performance instead of transformation. And I want to make sure that we're about transformation and not performance. If we're looking at the close, we're looking at the artist, but I want to look at the God of the artist, if that makes sense. So I don't know. Old school, of course, folk preaching, the history of it, of course, is, Y.T. Walker says it like this, that there were two surviving Africanisms. There was music and there was preaching. Of course, at the end of the sermon, then they become one, where the preacher begins to sing while they're talking. That's called, of course, the melodic, in a melody, that is a hoop. Of course, we know, or the sacred hum. If you go back further, it's called, well, everybody doesn't do that, because I guess now there are different, of course that's surviving, it's still going on now, but there are different forms and types of preaching now. In fact, a person I mentioned in another video, Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes, to me, has in many ways revolutionized celebrating the worship and the preaching moment, because he doesn't hoop. So instead of waiting and building all the way to the end and having this awesome hoop, what he has done and others have done, they celebrate each point. They celebrate each point. They build it to a certain place, get the people, then sit the people back down, get them to a certain place, and do that again. Because it's hard to do that. There's so much pressure that is put on this close, this hoop. And now Dr. Martha Simmons and I, we've gone round and round over the years. She is clear that, and let me go on record and say, not many people know more about preaching than Martha Simmons. But Martha Simmons says it like this: you'd hoop if you could. Anybody would hoop if you could, because that is just the highest form of preaching. I don't know if I agree with that. She's an expert. I don't know if I agree with that. I believe that any way that you close it, as long as it's authentically you, as long as it speaks of who you are, I think it can be powerful. I think it would be not a good situation for you to just learn to hoop so your revival schedule gets better. I mean, I guess it's call and career, but I don't know that you have to do that. I don't close myself like the average traditional close, but I do have a celebration. I think that that's what it's about. How shall we celebrate what God has done in our lives? How shall we celebrate this word of God that is just blessed, that I've worked over, that I've toiled over? How shall we celebrate it? Now, don't get me wrong. I love to hear hooping when I hear it. If somebody can go down in there and do that thing, it does. I don't do it myself. I don't know. I think it's up to the preacher and what's authentic. Now, I could close this and say, I feel my help coming, and then right now somebody's shouting, watching the thing. But I don't know if that's necessary all the time, because even though he did die, I can say that he died. I can say it that way, but you also can say he died. So I think it's the situation where what is authentic and what gives reverence to God. If people running around a service at the end, that might give reverence to God, but so does two tears falling down the cheeks and shaking hands under somebody's chin in a quiet moment. Dr. Frank Thomas says it like this: in church, we always build up the extroverts, but what about the introverts? What about those who experience God in the sacred silences of the moment? So I don't know. I think however you design your sermon, if it's authentically you design it to the close that's needed. The close that is say yeah, or the close that says, you know what, grab your neighbor and come down to the altar that we might experience God. And if it's authentic, however you close it, God is glorified. So I say design it and keep preaching.